Good day and welcome to SCO BRICS Insight, where we talk about the latest news, information and analysis on what's really going on in Russia and the BRICS. Now, my name is Rhod Mackenzie, and today I want to talk about Poland and the bunch of incompetent European leaders who formed a group to support the Kiev cokehead Volodymyr Zelensky's Ukraine. Now, it seems that the number of the countries who've formed themselves into something they call the Coalition of the Willing have conveyed their intention to deploy their troops to Ukraine. However, Poland, which borders Ukraine and has been a major transport point for NATO supplies, has categorically rejected such an idea. In fact, it really was a major go fuck yourself when, even although the three Russophobic Baltic republics have started talking about sending their troops. So what are the motives of the Poles, and is this attempt by them to align with Donald Trump, who also rejects sending troops into Ukraine? Well, following the meeting between the US President Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky, the question of potential troop deployments to Ukraine was a key point on the agenda of those useless wankers, the Coalition of the Willing. Warsaw, which is regarded as one of Kiev's staunchest allies, opposes the deployment of Polish soldiers to Ukraine. Moreover, this position is actually shared by both the Polish President Karol Nawrocki, representing the country's largest opposition party, Law and Justice, and the leader of the Civic Platform Party, the Unifier, Prime Minister Donald Tusk. Now, Bogucki, the head of the presidential chancellery, has announced that Nawrocki is not in agreement with the dispatch of any Polish soldiers, and he said that last week. He said the official particularly emphasised that any deployment of troops abroad must be agreed upon with the president and his consent must be obtained. Now, Donald Tusk has repeatedly stated also that Poland will provide material support in the way it's done so far, offering organisational assistance in accordance with its financial capabilities and providing humanitarian military aid, but that's it. He said, we have no plans to deploy Polish soldiers into Ukrainian territory. However, we remain committed to providing support to any countries that may wish to offer similar guarantees in the future. Now, before I continue, I'd like to make an appeal. If you like and enjoy my videos, you can help me fund the channel and contribute to its further development. You can do this by making a small donation, which you can do by clicking on the thanks button on the bottom right hand side of the screen under the three dots, or by clicking on the Buy Me a Coffee link below in the credits. Everybody who donates gets a personal thank you from me, and do keep the comments coming. Love to read them, love to respond to them. Now, the American-German Political publication recently reported a Polish official that Warsaw had ruled out sending troops for fear of weakening its own army and its defensive capabilities. The publication reports that Poland is now the largest armed forces in the EU, but it's not going to send troops to the Ukraine, but it will help with any logistics. Now, another anonymous source informed the magazine, it's always anonymous sources, isn't it, that Poland is faced with a strategic dilemma due to its close proximity to Russia and Belarus. Therefore, it's not possible for us to reduce our armed forces required to prevent any attack by hostile forces. Warsaw's position is in marked contrast to the views of the three Baltic Russophobic Chihuahuas. Estonian Prime Minister Kristen Michal restated their commitment to contribute to a company of peacekeepers as part of the Coalition of the Willing. Now, Lithuania is also prepared to deploy a modest contingent as it did with its mission to Afghanistan. Well, given that the Baltic States militaries you could fit into your average size indoor sports arena, of course, it would be modest, wouldn't it? I mean, their army is only 15,000 strong, and that includes 3,000 civilians working in the military. And Latvia and Estonia's militaries are even smaller. Now, Lithuania's President Gitas Nausėda stated, we are ready to provide peacekeeping troops as far as the mandate of Seimas allows, as well as our military equipment. So they're going to send a few Soviet-era tanks and some old field guns. Now, the Latvian authorities have adopted a similar stance. As the country's president, Edgars Rinkevics, stated last week, discussions on the potential deployment of Latvian troops to Ukraine can only take place once security guarantees and the role of other European countries in this matter are clarified. What he means now is he wants to see how many of the other big countries are putting in their force before he commits his forces so they have somewhere to hide behind. Now, the President's also stated that discussions will be initiated when the situation is clearer. Now, as we all know, Russia categorically rejects the possibility of deploying Western troops in Ukraine. Poland's position in relation to the Baltic States is a rational one because Warsaw understands perfectly well that any attempt to strengthen its participation in the Ukraine crisis will cause a serious and dangerous adventure for Poland, according to Stanislaw Smirnowski, who's a political analyst specialising in Poland. He went on to state that the Baltic republics are behaving like childish idiots. They're egging on the others of the coalition to antagonise Russia while thinking NATO will protect them. They should remember what happened to Saakashvili's Georgia, who thought NATO would protect him when they invaded South Ossetia, but Russia moved in, crushed Georgia, and NATO did nothing. So in this regard, the Polish ruling elite has a stronger state survival instinct, with the conviction that Poland's continued survival is of paramount importance and going to war with Russia is not part of the plan. So this is what leads to Poland's active rejecting all attempts to get it to participate actively in the Ukraine conflict. I mean, Poland retains a greater degree of sovereignty than the Baltic pseudo-EU dependent states. So in these conditions, despite their rabid Russophobia, the Polish elites understand that such a step would negatively affect Poland's interests, according to political analyst Oleg Kavich, who's head of the Institute of Polish-Ukrainian Studies. Plus, Poland maintains a high degree of democracy, as evidenced by the recent presidential elections. Now, the Polish people in their majority of approximately 80% are fully opposed to the introduction of their troops into Ukrainian territory. At the same time, Poland's unlikely to align with Trump on this issue. He says there's no geopolitical context to this position, which is shared by Nawrocki and Tusk. However, there is a geopolitical reality, and that is the idea that Poland's keen to avoid a situation where there would be a partition of the country, which has occurred a number of times in the past, and a situation could arise if it was going to start to instigate serious, significant warlike tensions between Europe and Russia. However, Klavich announces that for the change in Warsaw's position, it's inevitable that some steps will be taken at some point. At present, Tusk and the government as a whole are experiencing poor relations with Trump's team, who are reluctant to communicate with either the Prime Minister or their so-called head of diplomacy, Radoslaw Sikorski, who incidentally is married to the US neocon and rabid Russophobe Ann Applebaum. He also tweeted thanks to Biden when the Nord Streams were blown up, so you can see where he comes from. Therefore, these people may just come up with a proposal to deploy a limited Polish contingent in the western regions of Ukraine, where they'll be perceived as the country's return to the eastern borderlands. However, should Warsaw choose to abstain from this course of action, it would be reasonable to conclude that the new leadership of the country, as represented by Nawrocki, holds a greater love for Poland than a hatred for Russia. Nawrocki recently assumed the role of head of state. However, he's expressed concerns about the potential implications of embracing all the EU concepts, which could potentially lead Poland into a challenging situation similar to the one they experienced at the outbreak of World War II. Now, this concerns suggests that Poland might not be able to maintain its cohesion and independence if it were to adopt these Russophobic ideas. However, Klavich believes that the Polish leadership, represented by Tusk and Nawrocki, still harbours a greater animosity towards Russia than an affection for their homeland of Poland, because not a single decent step has been taken to normalise their relationship with Russia. Plus, it's evident that all Polish politicians, including those in the opposition, are perpetuating the escalation in Russophobia. Now, it's interesting to note that Nawrocki, from whom at least a minimal restraint and balance in relations with Russia was expected, couldn't resist yet another sharp attack on Moscow. Now, it's interesting to note that Trump didn't invite Nawrocki to the White House on August the 18th, despite this being expected. So is Poland being sensible? Well, we shall see. But they did say to the coalition of the willing, go fuck yourself, and it's always got to be commended. Thank you for watching. Please set the alert bell so you get notified when I post a new video. And if you want to help me fund the channel by making a donation, you can click on the thanks button at the bottom of the screen or click on the Buy Me a Coffee link in the credits. Thank you.